All right, folks, here's part two of Kevin Ruby's small block 340 stroker. Where we left off yesterday is basically we got the timing chain cover housing back on. The cam is timed now. Got the rocker arm assemblies on. So now, starting with the harmonic balancer piece of it, I have already kind of started and engaged my tool here. But always remember, any engine, doesn't matter, GM, Ford, Chrysler, always remember to put oil or lubricant. I use my bearing lube, but I put it on the journal of the harmonic balancer so that when it goes and engages that rubber seal that's in the timing chain cover, you don't burn it up on startup. There's not going to be any oil there when you initially start it up, so you can very easily burn that. Then you got to pull all that stuff back off. And on small block Chrysler, if I remember correctly, I have to remove the whole timing chain housing again. And I could be wrong on that, but I don't think you can pull it like a Chevrolet from the outside with the pullers. I think that's how it goes. But anyway, it's a pain. You don't want to get into that. I'm using this tool here. This tool is a harmonic. I've had it for I don't know how long, but I want to tell you, it has paid for itself a long time ago. It's my PT Tools. It's a harmonic balancer puller set, and I can do Chevrolet, all the GM, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, Buick. I've never done a Cadillac, but I'm sure I probably can. You can do Ford. I do from 289s, 302s, 351s, Clevelands, 390s, 428s, and then of course all of the small block and big block Chryslers, 273 through 440. So I haven't done a 426 Hemi yet, but I'm sure it's the same process. So I'm going to start getting this thing going. I've got the tool on right here. I'll put my bolts in, and I'm going to start tightening it up. This is kind of a long process, so we'll probably edit some of this out, but everybody gets the gist of it. This is, however, this is an SFI. This is an SFI harmonic balancer, brand new. It's an expensive one. Kevin spent a lot of money on it, but this being a 416, I didn't want to go with really a stock balancer. Sometimes those stock balancers, so this has, I left the timing marks unpainted. You'll see that when we turn it over. So when I put a timing light on it, I want the thing visible so I can see when I'm timing this thing. When you do a flat tap at cam, you want to get everything as close as possible so you can get up on the RPMs and break that cam in, break those lifters in. So I don't like to spend a whole lot of time cranking and figuring out what's wrong. I like to get as close as I can. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start installing the harmonic balancer. So, got the harmonic balancer on now. I want to say something. I love building engines. I really do. But the one part I cannot stand is putting the harmonic balancers on and off. It's just, sometimes they're super easy. But when you get into a brand new crankshaft, like a stroker, and you have a brand new harmonic balancer, they're a pain. Now, you can have it honed, and it does make it easier. I didn't have this one honed, but you can pay your machine shop to go in and hone it, but still, I don't think I've ever done a stroker anything, Mopar, Ford, or GM, that wasn't just a big pain in the rear, being extremely tight. So just had to get that out there. This is where you got to have patience and not get mad. So, but this it really didn't fight. It was actually pretty good. So, your factory stuff is much easier, but now we've got our harmonic balancer back on. And as you noticed earlier in the video, I had the wrong bolts in for the balancer. But these tools, you don't mess with those unless you got the right tool. All you'll do is hurt yourself and break parts. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and put the water pump on, and we're gonna start prepping, probably before we put too much of the accessory drive on, we're gonna go ahead and start putting the intake manifold on. I'm gonna test fit it and see many times, especially when I use an aftermarket aluminum intake, you'll have Edelbrock, everybody will tell you, don't even use the gaskets, just use silicone and build up the china wall on the china walls on the front and back. I'm going to test it and see how much. I'm going to set the gaskets on with the intake. If I remember correctly, this one fit pretty good, so I'm not really going to need to do that. And something else, before I forget, on a Mopar, do not forget this lovely little thing. So now I've got everything dialed in, I need to put this in. You forget one of these, put it in, oh, you can fire it up. And you're not gonna have any oil pressure, and no, things aren't gonna work out so well for you. So here in a little bit, I'll show you what we're gonna do. Okay, as you can see, Trish and I got the intake manifold on. Ended up, we didn't need to use our build up the china wall. The gaskets actually work perfect. They have the head gaskets have the tangs that hold them in place. The intake just came down beautiful. Probably because we're using factory intake with factory style heads, they usually fit pretty darn good, unless you really go into milling things. If you mill your heads, I guess everybody knows this, but for those who don't, any engine, when you go to plane out the heads and you remove material from the face here for, say, compression or just clean them up, the head's gonna go further down. So when that head goes further down, these bolts are not gonna intersect. So anytime you mill your heads, you always wanna mill the intake. That's on any engine. That's not Mopar specific. That's all engines. I guess everybody probably knows that. But in case you didn't, just thought I'd share. So everything fit beautifully. So that's all sealed up with the gaskets and the intake. Now, what I want to show folks is how to phase the distributor when you get ready to fire it up. Now this could be, if it's in the vehicle, you just pulled the intake and you did a whole top end change, and you're putting everything back together. You always want to get it up on the number 1. I'm on the power stroke now. I've got it about 10 degrees right here. I followed my valves. So now we're up on where it's about to fire. Both valves are pretty much closed. Yep. So you can see I can move the push rods. This is how I kind of feel for if we're too tight or too loose. I know this is not adjustable like a Chevy, but I did measure with the push rod. I have a push rod checker, several of them. That's how I verified my push rod length with the preload. But that's for another video. Right now we're getting into phasing the distributor. So on a Chrysler, there's only big block, small block. There's only 2 ways it can go. It can go to where it needs to be or 180 out. It's either 0 or 180 out. It has this screwdriver looking tang. And you look down here, that is the distributor gear. That distributor gear right there is where the distributor locks into. This is so easy on a Mopar. So let me show you. As you can see, I want my distributor to point towards number 1 because that's how I've got my cap phased. Well, right now, if I go to put it in, hell, it's pointing over here. It looks like number 6. So what do? So easy. I'm gonna take my flat-headed screwdriver right here. Just gonna put it down here, and I'm gonna turn it to the left, or to the right, and it's a helical gear. So it's gonna sit there and it's gonna turn. Now I can turn it to where I want it. Okay, so I just turned it there. Now you can see I moved it. Come in here and you look. I need to move it quite a bit more. So, well, not quite a bit more, but let's do this again and keep adjusting. Now I'll turn it back to the left. Okay, closer, but not right. Keep turning. I'm getting closer there. That looks like that's going to get pretty darn close. Let's see what happens. I'm going to set this in. Look at there. Now I'm pointing just about to the number one, about right where I want it. This number one cylinder. So now I can phase this distributor where I want it. I'd say pretty darn close right there. This is a Pertronics distributor. I personally, for the older cars, I love them, especially going from points to condenser. These are great. Now there's another guy on YouTube that puts them down and he comes up with all his theories, and you know, he's a self-proclaimed Mopar expert, somebody's uncle, I don't know. But I've yet to have one of these fail me. I'm sure there are plenty of them that have failed. Now, I'll tell you what will knock this thing out. If you install a Pertronics distributor and you turn the ignition key to the ignition on, it will burn that module up if you just leave the ignition key on for, say, an hour, 45. It'll get hot, and it does burn it up. That's why you have an accessory on your basically street cars. If you want to run accessories while the engine's off, but you will burn the module up if you leave it on. Otherwise, I put these things on Chevys, Fords, Oldsmobiles, Mopars, Pontiacs, Buicks. They just make it so easy. And they have a curve kit for these things. There is a curve kit for each one of them. You can get the springs and you can change the curve. This one, we're not going to mess with. That needs to be done when it's in the car. You don't mess with curve kits until you want to dial it in the car. Even on a dyno, you wouldn't do it because you want the conditions of what the car is going to be. So, anywho, yes, I do have two different bolts here. I'm looking for the other two. So, Kevin, don't worry, I'm aware. I do see that. You guys that pay a lot of attention to details, which is what you should be doing. So we're going to continue on, and now go ahead and put the cap on, and then we're going to get back up on the front on the accessory drive. Okay, so there it is. It's ready for the test stand. So just to recap, this is a friend of ours, Kevin Ruby, down in Midlothian, Texas, good friend of ours, and also owns a great contracting company, by the way, if you need any kind of contractor done in your home. So Ruby Construction LLC, they're awesome. Wish they were up here in Oklahoma. So the 340 is topped off now. So we got the accessory drive all on. So I'd like to talk about in a minute. I'm going to show you all the car. This car was kind of funny optioned. It came ordered with manual steering and manual brakes, and it had AC. So in those days, you could order any way you wanted. You didn't have to have a package per se. However, there's several different bracket combinations on each type of option. So it took a long time when we first built the car for these brackets. Now, I'm going to recommend to Kevin to do what we did to Rick Willis's 67 Barracuda. We updated his car with a vintage air. It was like a stage 1, not a complete vintage air system, but it did update the compressor from the big V2 or the R2, or whatever it was, the big, huge compressor that goes here. These brackets accommodate that. The problem with those compressors is not that they weren't good, they were outstanding, but they take up a lot of space. Number 2, you can't get parts for them anymore. It is almost impossible to find parts for those compressors, at least that's my experience. So I'm going to recommend to Kevin, but it's totally up to him, that we go to a sanding compressor, and it really cleans this whole system up when you run to that sanding. All you have to do is just change your hoses. It's really easy. And they do have a bracket. I was hoping maybe we could at least maintain this bracket here for the sanding, but we'll talk to the vintage air people about that if that's the way Kevin wants to go. Also, if you look over here on a small block Mopar, on the driver's side, they came with a gasket, and the gasket was also a shield that shielded your spark plug wires from the heat of the exhaust manifold. It kept the wires from prematurely burning up. Those are pretty much unobtainium these days. I know of maybe one person that has one, but they're not going to get rid of it. I know Nick Panarides on Nick's Garage. He had one, and I think he ended up finally giving it up for somebody. I can't remember, but that shield would come up and it protected these wires. If worst comes to worst, we'll just go with boots like you do on headers. But these are the 340 high flow exhaust manifolds. They actually flow pretty good. I'm not an expert. Obviously, they don't flow like headers. I know. Yes, this car, if we'd had headers, yes. That's not what Kevin wanted. Kevin wanted a factory appearance looking car, and he didn't want to have to deal with headers. And headers can be a pain in the rear. They really can. So he spent a lot of money on these manifolds. Now, we could have gone and had them extrude hounded like the fast guys do in their class of racing, but we're really not there. We're not going all out on this car. So it is going to be a sleeper. It does appear to be a 340, but it's a 416 with a really great set of pistons, heads, been fully bowl ported. Looks like a 5-angle valve job. So it should really scream. Now, here's another thing. Why did we go to a spacer on this car? You notice I had to use a spacer here. Well, the reason why I had to use a spacer, this is an AVS2. I believe it's an AVS2. I could be wrong. Kevin spent a lot of money on this carburetor. These are great carburetors, man. I've had great success with these Edelbrock. I want to say it's an AVS2, but it's, I think when I looked the number up, it was like 650 CFM. For what he's doing for a 4-speed car, this is going to be fantastic. But we had to put the spacer there because if you look over here, as everybody knows, the old Carter had a mechanical choke pull-off, and there was a spring that went down in there, and it was a thermal spring that obviously operated the choke here. We don't have that. We have an electric choke now. So this had to be raised because of this banjo fitting right here that goes under the carburetor. We had to lift it up to make room because the fuel line comes under the base. So it is a 4-hole spacer. Add a little bit of throttle response to it too. I've had good luck with spacers over my time with racing and everything. But yeah, this thing should really be a screamer. So let's go out here and look at the car. Here's Kevin's 1970 Dodge Dart Swinger. This car was brought out of the field, and I want to tell you, I disassembled it completely, and man, was it ever a basket case. It was really bad. Got it disassembled, and my good friend, again, Brian Smith, Kevin and I are good friends with him. They're in Maypearl, Texas. Brian did his magic work, and he literally went in and put new pans in this car. This car has beautiful floor pans in it now, trunk pan. He did a lot of work to the subframe on this car, putting it all back. I could go on and on about what all Brian did. And I think he also skinned it. He put the new quarters on it, if I remember correctly. So this car has literally been on a rotisserie. It's been totally gone through the whole body. Then it went to Barry Adams in Kemp, Texas, where Trish is from. So guy named Barry Adams did the paint. Want to say it's FC, is it FC7? I can't remember. It's a badass looking. When it was first painted up without all this dust, it was beautiful. But anyway, it was an automatic car from the factory. Kevin decided, hey, we're here the way it's optioned. Why not just go ahead and make it a 4-speed? Well, that's why we have where we're at now in the engine with the cam. When we went before, it had a pretty tight converter the way Kevin was going to run it. now that we went with a 4-speed and that I don't have to deal with vacuum on the brakes, it kind of gave me a green light to get pretty gave me a lot of room on that cam to get to make it happy, let's say. So now we're going to test that engine. We are going to go ahead and install the bell housing clutch. Yes, Kevin, I do need to owe you the spline count on the clutch. And then our good friend his name is Joe Williams from Just Mopar Joe here on YouTube. Joe and his awesome brother Drew are going to come out and they're going to install all of the quarter window and the door window hardware. And I've already got parts from Dante's. All that's coming. Joe actually did the charger. He and Drew did the charger up here. And they did a great job on the glass, and finally I could roll the windows up and down on the charger up there. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're going to get this thing tested. Hopefully next week we'll have it on the test stand. I made some mods to the test stand. I've got to finish wiring everything up and put it in conduit, clean all the wires up. But now we're going to run I installed an Innovate 2, basically a Lambda system. I know it's not under a load. It's just freewheeling on a test stand, but I can get it pretty close on set and idle with running the O2 sensors, even on a carburetor now. So I have a lot more instrumentation. You can never have too many sensors or measurements on an engine. So got a new vacuum gauge, Innovate system. Pretty excited. So hopefully next week you guys will see us running it on the engine stand.